Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the news brief. Today we're going to be talking about, the aftermath of the Putin and Trump phone call where they were supposed to agree to a 30-day ceasefire. And of course, we're going to discuss it together in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. So please do leave your questions, suggestions, constructive criticism, anything that's on your mind, because I do enjoy this two-sided communication. Let's go. So, as we all probably heard already, President Trump had a phone call with President Putin, and Trump said it was a very, very productive phone call. However, I do want to say that it was incredibly underwhelming. Putin did not use this phone call to commit to a 30-day ceasefire. In fact, he used this phone call for the opposite reasons. He used it in order to put out many more demands, as we have already, discussed in many, many previous news briefs, where he wants no military aid to Ukraine. Basically, he wants all of the allies to abandon Ukraine. He is putting forth demands that Ukraine cannot militarize. In fact, he wants the Ukrainian military to cease all of its exercises and all of our preparations, while the Russian military is allowed to get foreign aid and the Russian military is allowed to prepare for everything. In this phone call, Putin technically agreed to a temporary ceasefire on the electric infrastructure and basically power infrastructure. But that's already a lie, because even though he hasn't hit electric infrastructure from yesterday already, we have seen an increase in the civilian infrastructure strikes. There were many, many drones flying over Kyiv yesterday. Some of them were very audible near my personal home. There was something that was taken down near the homes of my friends. It was very, very loud here. There were multiple strikes on the eastern parts of Ukraine, and they were deadly and brutal and awful. So in reality, this promise that Putin stopped targeting power infrastructure is really just a lie, because he is targeting even further civilian infrastructure and increasing the amount of strikes on Ukraine in general. And I don't even believe that he's honestly going to stick to the not targeting power infrastructure promise in general. This phone call basically ended up just being productive and useful for Putin, because it gave him the opportunity to put forth more of his demands. There is actually this great bit from the BBC that summarizes quite a lot of what happened, so I'll play it for you right here.
Donald Trump's heavily trailed phone call with Vladimir Putin hasn't led to Moscow signing up to a 30-day ceasefire in Russia's ongoing war with its neighbor. In fact, the 90-minute conversation seems to have given the Kremlin more of an opportunity to make conditions on any truce, including the requirement that Kyiv must stop receiving foreign military aid and intelligence and end military mobilization. Mr. Putin did say, however, he was willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, but 80% of it has already been destroyed by Russian bombs. This evening, President Zelensky said it's clear Russia isn't ready to end this war. The whole game is to weaken Ukraine. We'll be live in Kyiv, but first, Sarah Smith has our top story from Washington.
Ukrainian forces carried on training to take on their Russian invaders today. A permanent peace deal still seems a long way off. A good and productive conversation, said Mr. Trump. Disappointing or underwhelming might be more accurate, as he failed to negotiate a full 30-day halt in the fighting. He posted on social media, "We agreed to an immediate ceasefire on all energy and infrastructure, with an understanding that we will be working quickly to have a complete ceasefire and ultimately an end to this very horrible war between Russia and Ukraine." Attacks on Ukrainian power plants, this one was bombed in November, caused frequent power cuts across the country. A 30-day reprieve will be welcome on both sides. Ukraine's also struck oil and gas facilities inside Russia. Vladimir Putin did look particularly satisfied just after the phone call as he met one of his advisors on Ukraine. Before he'll discuss ending the conflict, he insists all foreign military aid to Ukraine must be cut off. Air raid sirens sounded in Kyiv after those ceasefire talks. The very limited truce mean Ukrainians could still come under Russian attack. Ukrainian President Zelensky was visiting Finland today. He says he wants to know exactly what Russia has promised and how they will be made to stick to it.
Ми ж підтримуємо
We support all steps aimed at ending the war.
закінчення.
But to do this, we need to understand what exactly we support. President Trump is a busy man. When he has time, he can call me. He's got my number. We are ready to talk through further steps with pleasure.
Donald Trump wants to move on quickly to agree a final settlement, but he may have been too optimistic about how close he is to reaching a peace deal. Talks will now focus on the demands Russia wants met before a complete ceasefire, let alone a final end to the conflict. Here at the White House, there was remarkably high confidence yesterday that a peace deal was within reach. But now they're looking at another round of negotiations just to try to get the Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to a complete ceasefire. And he's making those stringent demands that all foreign military assistance to Ukraine has to be stopped. All intelligence sharing with Kyiv has to be stopped before he will talk about putting a final end to the conflict. Probably remember Donald Trump used to say that he could end this war within 24 hours. It's obviously proving to be considerably more complex than he anticipated.
All right, Sarah, thank you. Sarah Smith there, a North America editor, live at the White House. Let's go straight to Kyiv and James Landale, who's in the Ukrainian capital. I'm sure folks where you are, James, are happy their energy infrastructure, or what's left of it, might escape attack for a while, but there's still no commitment from Moscow to a full ceasefire that Kyiv has already signed up to.
Yeah, and that's why Kyiv's response, I think, has been pretty calibrated and cautious. President Zelensky has welcomed the idea, at least the promise, of an end to Russian attacks on energy infrastructure. He said that even a partial ceasefire is a positive result. But I have to say, Clive, this evening, there's not much evidence of any ceasefire. Not only have we been hearing the air defences and drones in the skies above Kyiv, President Zelensky has in the last few moments just issued a statement in which he has said there have been numerous drone attacks across the country, not just in this region, but also in the Sumy region and other parts of the country, some of them hitting hospitals and other civilian areas. So there is clearly tonight no evidence of an immediate ceasefire by Russian attacks in the air. And I think that's why we've had from the Ukrainians a calibrated response. They want to support what progress that the Americans have made. They don't want to anger President Trump again. But at the same time, President Zelensky said, he made it very clear tonight that he says that what's been agreed today shows that Russia is still not ready to agree a peace deal here in this country. And just as you've said that, more air defences going off behind me. Clive.
Yeah, indeed. All right, the war continues. James, thank you. James Landale there live in Kyiv.
And now it's going to be easier for us to discuss further. I personally think that at this point, Trump, who is definitely disappointed in how the conversation went, because of course he wasn't able to guarantee the ceasefire and be the best deal maker there is in the world, he now has an opportunity to either pressure Russia into reducing its demands and coming up with compromises, which, to be fair, so far, he hasn't done at all. Russia hasn't been pressured into any compromises. A ceasefire is not a compromise. Russia hasn't been pressured into giving up any of its demands, and their demands have been growing and growing and growing, and they're now more than they were in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So it's kind of funny that the US is partaking in these negotiations, because they're really not negotiations, they're ultimatums from Russia. And we really don't need a third party to negotiate Russia telling us that it wants our territory, our children, it wants to demilitarize us, and it wants to take away all of our foreign aid. This is not a negotiation, this is capitulation. And again, we didn't need someone to negotiate that for us. These are the things that Russia has already been putting forth out there, and these are the things that have been horrendous, and they have been here since the first days of full-scale invasion. And in reality, again, no one needs to negotiate that. Russia has already said that. So this negotiation sounds kind of like a joke, and it's something that we have been saying all together. But yeah, President Trump basically has two roads. He can pressure Russia into giving up its demands and actually compromising, or what would be fair is taking all of its soldiers out of Ukrainian land and seizing its activity on our territory and seizing its war. But of course, no one's going to do that because Trump doesn't care for it enough. And his second choice is to pressure Ukraine to make more concessions. And what we know based on what we've seen Trump do already, I think it's going to be the latter. In fact, in the last couple of days, Trump has been doing budget cuts right through Doge, and those are incredibly controversial in the US. Some of his supporters are insanely pro all of these cuts and pro all of his policies, and a lot of Americans are really against them. But one of these cuts happened to be in the department that was investigating Russia's war crimes in Ukraine. And that particular department was concerned with the kidnapped Ukrainian children that have been kidnapped to Russia. That department was finding those children and he was returning them back to Ukraine, which is a very important part of Russia's war crimes because kidnapping children is a marker of genocide. And Russia has, in fact, been not only kidnapping children, but also quite literally indoctrinating them and making them do military drills and military exercises. And provided that a lot of these recent Trump cuts do concern Ukrainians in America and Ukrainians in Ukraine, nothing about Russians, I do think that, unfortunately, he's going to be leaning into pressuring and bullying Ukraine to make further concessions. Now, there is not much else that I can say, really, because we're still waiting on the Trump-Zelensky phone call and what Zelensky is going to have to say after that. But so far, basically, what he has said is that this phone call showed us time and time again that Putin is neither ready nor willing to have a ceasefire because he's not interested in it. He's interested in bullying Ukraine. He's interested in continuing to strike our infrastructure, and he's interested in continuing the war. And I agree with him. Unfortunately, that is all I have for you for today. And thank you for listening. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a lot more in-depth analysis about what's happening once we have news from Zelensky, and once we can put both of these situations together and see what the White House is doing about it. And that's when I will give you a much more detailed and much more in-depth analysis. So thank you for watching. If you do enjoy news briefs, please do subscribe to this channel, turn on all of your notifications, send this video to a friend, give it a like, and yeah, drop all of your thoughts and yeah, drop all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Actually, please do ask me questions about this phone call and the peace deal in general, and I will read all of them and I will try to answer them for you in the next episode. Thank you and see you next time.